What's up and welcome to Idle Insights, a show where each week I, Treavor Bettis, talk to interesting people about idle champions and Dungeons and Dragons. With me this week is the amazing Johnny Chiodini.
Hello. Thank you so much for calling me an interesting person. That's a
You,
lovely way to start my day.
you're an extremely interesting person. I'm not gonna lie, Johnny. I've been extremely excited to talk to you on here because
Oh,
about Oxventure stuff. So I've been very excited for this. You are an extremely interesting person.
oh, thank you. That's very, very kind.
Johnny, for folks who may be out in the chat who don't know who are you for those fine folks who may not know?
So, well, at the minute, I am a sort of a solo YouTuber. I stream myself playing video games. I had like a Let's Play series on my own channel. I've been working in sort of video games for about 15 years now, for sites like Eurogamer. I used to work at GameSpot. But now I'm sort of doing my own thing. But sort of the other string to my bow is in tabletop role playing. I used to be head of video for a site called Dicebreaker, and for the last coming up on 6 years, I have been the DM for the Oxventure, which is a very fun, very, very silly actual play campaign.
Absolutely, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about them.
Mhm.
But before we get to that, I want to ask Johnny, how did you get into D&D?
So, my route into D&D was actually quite circuitous. I started off playing Deadlands, which is a wonderful role-playing game set in the
Yeah.
Weird West. It runs off the Savage Worlds rule set. I started playing that when I met some new friends. Like, I was kind of going through a rough patch. I'd had a rough breakup. I was, my mental health wasn't great. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, we've just had a spot open up in this role-playing group. Why don't you try it?" And I was terrified. And then I went along, and you know what? It turned out spending 3 hours pretending to be somebody else of an evening with some friends and a beer was like really therapeutic. So I kept going. And then eventually I sort of nervously tried my hand at running the game once or twice. And then some friends of mine said, "Look, we want to try D&D. Have you ever played it?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, are you willing to give it a go?" So I picked up the starter box with like the Minds of Fandelver.
Yeah.
We had maybe 3 sessions until real life got in the way. But then eventually I got an email from Luke Westaway from Outside Extra and the Oxventure, who said, "We're thinking of doing like a thank you video for to say, thanks for hitting 2 million subscribers on Outside Xbox. They want us to play D&D. Will you run it for us?" And I was like, "Sure, yeah, I'll do you a session." And when we were filming it, we were like, "Haha, that was fun. I wonder if we'll ever get to do that again." I don't think any of us knew what was coming really, or what we had in store. And I feel like maybe if they did know what was coming, they would have chosen a DM with more experience in D&D, because I'd played it 3 times ever,
But
and
you
then I
did an
was
amazing
running it.
job.
Oh, thank you. That's it's by the seat of my pants, I
Which
would say.
I think is probably the best way to do a campaign, honestly.
Yeah, well, I very quickly learned with that lot, just planning is it's 90% wasted time,
Yes.
because their approaches are always unexpected, which is I like, but
Yeah.
I very quickly came to realize that the best way to roll with it and not get flummoxed is to not have that solid a plan. Like, if there isn't a plan, if there's no path, it's impossible to go off the beaten path. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
No, exactly. Yeah. 100%. The thing that I've been doing recently is almost just kind of laying out the groundwork and being like, well, they might interact with this stuff.
right. Yeah, exactly. Just basically, the way I approach it is I make sure I work out how much information needs to come across for the thing to be realized and resolved, right? Basically, I need to know what the story is. And then, I have, best case scenarios for how they'll find different bits of information, or which NPCs in the world might have that information. But when it doesn't come out that way, it kind of, having a loose framework means that it's easier to pull something out and put it back somewhere else. Kind of like a telephone operator, just like making the right connections,
I really like that example, actually. That's very true, because it's like, hey, well, you can't see it because we're on the phone, but I'm going to take this and just plug that in over here now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what if the secret room in the mansion isn't in the mansion after all? It's underneath the pub, because that's where they are, and that's where they are expecting to find something. you know.
Yes, 100. It's always been weird to me when people are like, oh, my players missed this entire thing. I wasted all this time making this stuff. I'm like, just put it over there.
Yeah,
They don't
yeah,
know.
right. Yeah.
They don't go through your notes at the end of the session. Just
No, exactly.
boom.
Yeah. Although I will say I have had entire chunks be missed by the Oxventurers because I think like I've put the clues out there and they've just ignored them, and I've gone, all right, well, that bait didn't take. We haven't
Yeah.
got a bite there, and that's there's a document. It's not a graveyard. It's more of a laboratory with things like in stasis in jars where I can
they're in cryo freeze. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. They'll be back, those bits. Basically, it's
I like that. It's not a graveyard.
I think I've been stung so many times in other campaigns that I've been running by people going so far off the beaten track, the whole thing's had to be binned. I was foolish enough to start a campaign whereby for at least the first third of this campaign, the whole thing hinged on these people being undercover and maintaining that status. And the first big sort of conflict they blew their cover. And about half an hour after this happened, they were on the run because this entire town was trying to kill them. And one of the players went, did we just throw the whole campaign? I was like, yeah. Everything I had planned is irrelevant now. The whole campaign now is you need to live.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, okay, right, fine. And we were kind of all of us just like staring at each other with like plastered grins on our faces, like, yep, this is
what
the situation
did we
do? It was no one's fault, and it was everyone's fault all at once. It was great.
I think that's kind of a perfect descriptor of D&D. Well, that was one of the things I wanted to mainly talk about was that start of this, because like I've heard the story from Ellen, from Luke and Mike, where y'all played in a basement of a was it a pub that you all were playing in the basement of?
Yeah, it was kind of a pub / gaming venue.
Okay,
it's called Loading Bar in London, and it's got it's kind of modeled on like the video game bars in Japan. So like lots of board games, lots of video games, but a sizable basement that was sort of long enough that we could get a shot, with a big table. And we sort of know the people who run it, and they're pretty chill about people filming in the daytime. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I guess I hadn't heard the name mentioned before, because as soon as you said, I'm like, oh, I've heard of that place. Okay, yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the one.
Yeah. So like when that was just a one shot, like was like Geth a thing or anything like that? Did that all come later?
It all kind of got pieced together as it went. So Geth as a world sort of existed in name only. In fact, in that first session, you can hear me say, you're in the town of Caster Falls, I think, in the land of Geth, because I needed a name. Like I straight up admitted that I just picked a syllable.
I love that though. That's fantastic. I
never played Mass Effect, so I didn't realize Geth is the whole thing. So yeah. Like, I mean, there are only so many sounds a human mouth can make, so it's going to happen. But
the thing is like when the first time I heard it, I did immediately think of Mass Effect, but at the same time, I'm like, but also that's just kind of a cool name for a world.
Right. Yeah. And at some point, I don't know whether it was like us in sort of metadata on videos or whether it was just the community, but someone stuck an apostrophe between the G and the E.
Oh, I mean, it's fantasy. There's always got to be a random apostrophe.
Right, exactly. And I like it. That was when that weirdly for me was like one of the moments when I realized that it had clicked with people, and that it was kind of gathering momentum outside of just the bits that I was dropping in. And sort of 5, nearly 6 years down the line, it now feels like a living, breathing world that I'm so aware of the fact that I know less about it than the viewers.
Oh wow, that's wild.
Because I love the fact that there are people out there who've watched the whole thing 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
But sort of I've lived it once.
Yeah.
And so there are bits that have fallen out of my brain, and people are like, that you said this, but actually this about your own. Like, there was a key example one time. Dob got a fish in his lung. And I forgot we killed that fish. So at one point, I brought that fish back, and now the fish is alive again in his lung and has a coat of chainmail and a knife. It's all pretty weird stuff.
As you do.
Yeah. Now, Geth has really taken on a life of its own, which is, I think, one of the most flattering things about it is that now I feel like I'm driving a boat that isn't mine. Like, I feel like
interesting.
Instead of being like, I am a DM, and here is the thing that I have made that I'm putting out into the world, and I hope people like it. I now feel like it is a big, big ship, and I'm just on the rudder.
Wow.
And I don't always know what I'm doing.
You know which way it makes it go, which
yeah.
But, well, I also really loved that you passed off, like, I like the Blades in the Dark game. I love that was still in Geth in the future, and you took on a player role. Like, you handed it off and was like, okay, this is yours now.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, because I don't think the majority of DMs that have a homebrew would be comfortable with doing that. And so that was a fascinating thing to watch, because I watched the beginning of the Blades in the Dark game, and just kind of consciously knowing that you are now a player, and that you were still in the homebrew that you helped create, but you weren't the one in the driver's seat anymore. And just seeing that experience was actually pretty interesting. I liked it a lot.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think Luke did a phenomenal job. Like just wonderful. But also, I think it's just by nature of having spent all this time playing with the same people and then with the same characters, like, I trust them completely. It was easier that it was a different game and it was set in a different time period. Like, it felt like it felt like a spin-off rather than somebody driving literally the same thing. I think if there was going to be a series set like in Geth and also D&D, I think my worry would not be that somebody was going to take it and change it and make it not mine and mess it up or anything. It's more that, like I said, there's so much to keep track of that I would worry that it would place a whole bunch of constraints onto them. Because if they pull something out their head, you don't want people jumping down their throat to be like actually,
that's not actually how that works.
Yeah, that's two sons, you've forgotten. I don't. That's not what our audience sounds like, obviously. But, I hasten to add. I just, I wouldn't want the fruits of my creative freedom to limit theirs.
Yeah.
As it were. But in terms of people just coming along and inventing stuff, like, sometimes, people will pitch bits of lore to me in session, and I'll be like, yeah, that's canon now, why not?
I love that.
Like, there was a throwaway remark at one point. It was during it was a sponsored one for Magic the Gathering, I think. So it was kind of like, it felt like a very different thing, and we weren't even in Geth. Oh no, we were in Geth, sorry, but a Spelljammer ship had come crashing through. And we were talking about how to kind of get it back out of Geth again. And I can't remember who said it, but it was like, oh, if we go at night, it'll be easier because space will be closer. Right. And I think someone else was like, oh, I'm not sure how that's worked, if that's how that works. And I was like, nah, that's really funny. So just as a throwaway joke, we were like, yeah, at night, space comes down. So you're closer to space, but obviously there's no atmosphere. So you need like a personal oxygen mask. And I think I saw some comments being like, that's completely outrageous. There's no way they're making that canon. And I just saw those comments. I was like, try me.
Yeah.
So it's, it's, I feel like it is a recurring bit that it is 99% for me, but I just find it so funny. So yeah, it's safe to say I'm always up for introducing a weird new rule to Geth. I try not to be precious about it at all.
I mean, I gotta respect you for that, because like I know so many folks who are very precious about their homebrew. I mean, I'm in the process of finally making a homebrew, and I know that I'm going to be overly precious with that. Right. And so yeah, to just kind of be like, you know what, we're playing this fast and loose, and we're just making this for everybody as we can. I love that. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
So
go ahead. Carry on.
No, you go. You go.
I think a big part of that is down to I have kind of I run quite silly games when it comes to Eurocentric fantasy settings.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like they're like very tried and tested, and also I just like subverting them.
Mm.
Like Alan said it the other day to like one of the other Idle Champions Presents players on Fury of the Black Rose that like
Mm-hmm.
contextually like the Oxventurers is most similar to Terry Pratchett's Discworld, which is the biggest compliment I've ever been paid in my life, for one thing.
Oh.
But also, I just like I think it's, you know, it is probably the thing I aspire to rather than being like Tolkien.
Mm.
Because it's just it's fun to subvert the norms of fantasy, but also just use them as vehicles to make points about the actual society we live in, and you know, some of the nonsense things that go on.
Yep.
So I think that's partly why I'm not overly precious about it, is that the structural integrity of the world is so do I say flimsy or flexible? Both.
Little column A, little column B.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it you know, there is that flexibility, and I think the willingness to just break bits of it up and change the rules and stuff, like it makes it easier to let go of the reins and say to someone else, like, have at, basically.
That's awesome. So part of your DMing created the character that you're playing right now on Isle Champions Presents, Rust on the Harbor. How did Rust come to be?
So Rust was actually a player character for me before an NPC in the Oxventure.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so during the COVID lockdown of 2020, the first one in the UK, a friend of mine was like, I'm going to run a D&D campaign. And at the time I was like, I think I'm good. I'm not going to get involved. Like, A, it feels a bit too close to work, and B, like at that time I was running 3-4 campaigns.
Wow.
Yeah, I ran a lot of role playing during the
That's
pandemic.
awesome.
But then everyone seemed to be having so much fun. I was like, oh, you know what? Screw it. What's one more? I'm not leaving the house anyway. And it was a Saltmarsh campaign, and I got a rundown of all the different characters. And what they didn't have was a rogue.
Mm.
And I really wanted to play a Tabaxi because I like how kind of freebooting they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like how spirited. And because it's a Saltmarsh campaign, I was like, okay, we're all pirates. I was like, what can I do to make this pirate more interesting?
Mm-hmm.
And then I just thought it would be great to have somebody very, very highly motivated by money who doesn't understand it. So then that's where the whole 1 gold piece thing came from, because all he wants in life is 1 gold piece, but that's all he can imagine. So he's very pure-hearted. Well, yeah, no, I think so. I think there's a purity in his naivety, because he's a sellsword, so he will work for basically anyone. But you can persuade him to do something different if it seems like a good idea. So while he could be hired by absolute villains, also like you can appeal to reason with him, but mostly you can just motivate him by giving him 1 gold piece. And I became so fond of him over the course of that campaign. In fact, when I brought him in and started doing his French accent, 2 of the other players switched to doing French accents because they thought it was so much fun. Like, I remember one of the other players being like, I can't believe this has happened. I think he was a little bit irritated, but basically we went from having 1 French sounding person to having 3/5 of the party just giving it really bad French accents. So then there came a point where I was planning an Oxventure, and I was like, I need an NPC. And I was like, I just use Rust. Like, why not? Like, I think I mean, I think a lot of people have they struggled over the course of the pandemic. I think I remember specifically on that day, I was just feeling a little bit like, just feeling the weight of it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you're feeling like that, it's hard to drum up an entirely new character that feels nuanced and feels real and that you can be excited to play. So I was like, well, why don't I just play my favorite character? Because that will require no thought from me, but also I'll have loads of fun. And suddenly I was excited again. And I don't know whether it was that enthusiasm that came across, or the simple himbo conceit of Rust on the Harbor charmed people, but the party and the audience really warmed to him, and we had a great time. So I brought him back again, and everyone was excited. And so then when Codename got in touch and we're like, we want to put a character of yours into the into Idle Champions. Who would you pick? Like, it was a no-brainer. Like there was
yeah.
The only other candidate, the only other possible candidate, I think, would have been a wizard called Binbag, but everyone except Merylwen in the party like hates him, like horizontal hate him. So it didn't feel right to be like, we're getting the Oxventurers in, and this guy they hate. So it was only ever going to be Rust on the Harbor. And it was lovely to kind of talk to a whole bunch of people who wanted to know about this character, but also just like really talented design folk. And they were like, okay, give us the essence of this thing so we can turn it into a character in a video game. It was wild, like absolutely bizarre, but in the best possible way, I think.
I've heard so many stories now of people working with our team and everything to get their character into the game, and I'm always fascinated by it, of just like the questions that get asked, or just like the little things like, oh, could you actually put this on their outfit because it's a storyline thing. I love that sort of stuff.
Well, I was a little bit worried during the design process that they didn't think I cared, because every time they sent something through, I was like, this is perfect, great, no changes. And there came a point I was like, should I pick something to kind of to discuss with them, or nitpick so they know I'm paying attention, because they were just nailing it.
Yeah.
I think the only change I made at any point during the process was to suggest a different color for Rust, because Rust fur is very like it's very golden yellow, like the classic image of a tabaxi kind of holding onto a rock in the player's handbook. That was basically like, that was my first image of Rust, really, but in more piratey clothes. So that was the only thing that sort of didn't line up in the initial stuff. But other than that, they just killed it dead. It was amazing. It was great.
And I can assure you, there was no one be like, I don't think they're paying attention. It's always just like, yes, okay, good.
Okay, phew, good. The last thing I want to come across as is rude.
Absolutely not. No, because that was about the time that I started working here, and so getting to hear secondhand this stuff coming down the line, like when they're like, oh, we're gonna have the DM have a character, I'm like, that's brilliant, that's fantastic, I love that. And now knowing that that's not just an NPC, that is a player character you made first, like that genuinely warms my heart. Like, I think that's so good.
Rust.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, no, it was a delight. And biting my tongue when I couldn't talk about it to anyone was so hard, because there was, the people I played in that Saltmarsh campaign with, like, they're really close friends. And they were like, what's going on with you this week? I'm like, oh, not much.
You're just over the guard. Nothing. I swear.
And then when the announcement came out, I was like, I know this is going to be a lot in one go, but it's absolutely wild. It's great fun.
That's so good. I did just remember too, because like it was when I was first posting on socials and stuff, the comic that came out with Rust, the idea to use Rust one coin thing mixed with players gold farming, I was like, that's brilliant, that's perfect.
Well, I was that was something again that I was actually, the thing I was most nervous about going into the design process is like, I'm introducing a character that doesn't understand money in a game where you have you have
a scientific notation of money.
Right, exactly, and that's pouring in, and I was like, oh, okay, I hope this isn't going to be a problem. And I was like, look, I appreciate what the game is, and I appreciate what you're doing and everything, but this character doesn't get it. Like, he won't understand. And it wasn't a problem at all. They rolled with it, and then that comic came out, and I was like, okay, great. They've been like, how can you be so cruel when it's one gold piece? Just it's great.
So good, so good. Yeah. I think that was a combination of Dylan and Luke McKay. They knocked that out of the park.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do want to talk about Isle Champions Presents, and for folks out in chat who may not have seen in chat by now, this is a pre-recorded episode. We are in the past. You are in the future, where you've I guess no, it's only Thursday, so it's not that far ahead. So you got Thursday for you. That's nice. I guess that's good for you.
Yeah.
But we are up to episode 5 of Isle Champions Presents, having been done. The finale is next week. But I want to ask, how is Idle Champions Presents Fury of the Black Rose going for you so far?
It's been great fun. I mean, like, Bido Walters as a DM is just so good, like so talented. The presence he brings into every NPC is absolutely wonderful. And like, it's the cast is phenomenal. Like, obviously, I've been aware of High Rollers for quite some time, and I've worked with them previously, but I'd never worked with Gabe James before.
Oh, okay.
And he is just phenomenal. Like, he's wonderful, and I love Solak, and kind of, for characters that hadn't been played on screen before, like Solak and Miria, both of them, like, they bring so much to it. Like, it really, in a very real way, feels like their story, because they have such strong stakes in that world. The way they've brought that across has been brilliant. It's also been a really interesting challenge for me, I think, because well, like I said before, like, the Oxventurers is kind of like Discworld adjacent.
Yeah.
And Rust on the Harbor is one of the silliest things in that world.
Yeah.
So when I came in, at first I was like, okay, like, I cannot play this character initially any other way, like, until we understand Rust's baseline as, like, just sort of empty-headed, lovely, roguish cat guy. I can't start changing his arc and making him more worldly and more serious and more principled. So the first couple of episodes, I was kind of just sat there being like, do I quip now? Is that going to be too much immersion breaking? Like, I felt like, personally, there was a very thin line to tread between getting Rust across and actively undermining everything that was going on. So I'm pleased to say that now it's, I've been able to put a lot more worldliness and investment in Kryn into Rust on the Harbor. But I'm also quite proud to say that I have pulled some threads of nonsense out of the other characters. Like, everyone, no good Dungeons and Dragons character survives a campaign without being changed by the others. Like, everyone kind of pulls one another a little bit. And I feel like that's really worked, and it feels like a cohesive party. Like, it's funny, like, because I mean, Rust is a rogue. Rust, I've learned, because I've never played at this higher level before, can actually tank a lot of damage. Like, he's got over 100 hit points now, and he's got, like, uncanny dodge.
What kind of rogue is he again?
Assassin. It's just pure assassin path.
Oh my gosh, assassins are ridiculous.
I
have one in my group that is high level, and it just melts everything.
It's absolutely wild. Like, I didn't realize sort of the potential for just staying up, but also trying to help other people in combat. It's been really, really lovely to sort of learn. So ever since we kind of leveled up mid-campaign, and I took Sentinel as a feat.
Ooh.
Getting a Sentinel reaction, a Sentinel attack, has been great, because, like, I feel like Solak and Miria, while, like, Miria especially is like a glass cannon. Like, I think Miria's gone down twice.
Yeah, I think that's what I've heard so far
in the campaign. I think also that's partly because B-Dave knows that Mark can take it and isn't afraid to throw some really harsh stuff that way. But I find myself not worrying so much about either of those characters, because I know that even if they're almost down, they can do some incredible damage. So I kind of find that Rust's, like, whole thing is to kind of, like, do the whole swashbuckling back-to-back thing with Sentry and Merylwen, and just wait for someone to have a bang at them, and then just try and pop out and just hit them with a sword. It's been it's been wild. So yeah, it's definitely been. I mean, partly because I've spent so little time playing Dungeons and Dragons. I would say this has been the greatest D&D specific player challenge for me that I've ever experienced.
Oh wow.
But
Okay.
I feel like it's gone well, and it's been such a giggle. Like seeing people react to these characters, like in the Twitch chat, is just great fun.
Well, the joy for me, especially the first episode, and I hadn't thought about it until you started talking as Rust. I actually watched. I like I said, I watched the Blades in the Dark thing, so I heard your character voice there. Hadn't realized I hadn't heard you do Rust yet, and so immediately I busted up laughing. I'm like, this is perfection.
It's hard to imagine Rust being any more different than Casimir Jones.
You're right. It's so different.
He sounds bored and annoyed. Yeah, and then Rust is just he's just an airhead, and oh god, I love him.
Absolutely fantastic. Man, Rogue Assassin with Sentinel, that's so good. That's so much fun. Especially since I learned recently. I had thought the sneak attack was once per round, and then someone's like, no, it's once per turn. I'm like, okay, yep, don't just stab them all the time.
You just, as long as you've got advantage on the attack.
Yeah.
So which sometimes it feels hard to engineer. Because like sometimes you're in the middle of a melee, you can't be like, I'll use my bonus action to hide. It's like
I'm just gonna put Merowyn right in front of me real quick.
Right. So that's well, I mean, when B-Dave was like, here's a Dragonel that you can ride around in combat, I was like, oh, that sounds great, because that's a party member that's within 5 feet
of me.
All right, yeah, cool. So he's just like, like in films where you see like one person's driving the car and someone's got a baseball bat and they're just hitting the mailboxes. It's like that, but it's a rapier and a cat.
It's a rapier and a cat. Oh, it's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. So you talked about it a little bit there, kind of from your perspective, but like, what is Rust's perspective of his new party members?
So, he has definitely. So I think, right, one of the biggest things for him to overcome is the shell shock of just how tough Kryn is, and also the realization that his arrival coincided with really angering Lord Soth and putting an entire settlement in mortal peril. So some guilt there, but I think that he's seen the others and seen what they're capable of, but also how seriously they take life. And at first, I think he was just like, this lot are a lot, like I think there were points where he was just like, why don't they just relax and enjoy a lovely cushy life? And I think as he's come to reckon with the various forces of Kryn, I think he's come to realize that actually these people are extraordinarily well-rounded given what they have had to go through. And I think one of the moments that was really like joyous for me, but also a big sense of relief, was when I, as Rust, got to be like, no, I believe in this lot. So it was when he sort of got contacted in a dream by Lord Soth and was like, you should just give up and run. Like, this isn't your fight. And I was able to be like, no, I found some people that I want to fight for, and alongside and like with, like, he's been won over basically by how principled they are. And kind of, I wanted the implication there to be like, is he learning that there's more to life than being a hired sword? Because like mercenaries can be very powerful, but mercenaries don't believe in anything other than getting paid.
Yeah.
Whereas with such principled sort of characters, like, it's hard, like I say, it's hard not to be changed by that. So I think he's learning a little bit about his principles, really.
That's fantastic. I like that. That does make me bring a question to mind. Do you think that you're going to carry over any of this to Rust, like in a later Oxventure game, or do you see this as kind of like a separate Rust?
So this is the thing, right? Is I do want, basically, yes, want Smash together, but it's working out precisely how in the chronology, because and believe you me, the Oxventure fans are a little peeved at me for this. They're still only level 8. We've been going for 5 years. And in the comments of the latest campaign that we've got running at the minute, people are like, when will you let them level up? They've been level 8 for 2 years. And they have, it's true. I'm not deliberately keeping them down. It just hasn't happened. Like, I'm not kidding. We forgot to talk about it at the start of this year because we wrapped up a season late on last year, and we knew that we were going pretty much straight into the next one. So before we'd even wrapped Legacy of Dragons, I was having to come up with the premise for Extinction and, like, tell people so we could get key art in place and all that kind of stuff. And just in that process, I forgot to say we should probably level up. So anyway, to get back to your question, like, yes, I really want it to fit together, but like, I mean, I could just bring Rust back to level 17.
Well,
that'd be quite funny.
I will say, like, for me personally, like, I've had characters move around to different things at different levels, but like still been like, this happened here. I know you were level 17 in this game, but you're not in this one.
Yeah. You know what? We can just forget the levels. You're right. Like, because I've never had to do this before, so this is great insight. Thank you. I do think. I think if there's one thing I will bring over in particular with Rust, it is, I think it will be the delusion that his rapier sometimes does unexplainable things, because it's happened twice now where he's done a strike at the same time Miria has absolutely iced something. So the first time was like he stabbed a death dragon and Miria exploded it, and he was like, oh wow. And then the second time was at the 5th episode. It just so happened that Russ got the killing blow on Lord Soth. But at the same time, Miria opens up a soul cage and takes his spirit away. But Rust, being Rust, I don't think has put 2 and 2 together. And it's just like, what did my sword just do? So I think he's basically going to walk around, like Dirty Harry. Because he honestly believes that his rapier could be a world-ending weapon.
There's a chance that I stab you and then you just explode into ice. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Like, statistically, it happens once every 4 combat encounters. But yeah, no. But you know what? It'll be nice to have that kind of stuff in there, but also just like I don't want to discard the bond that has been enhanced between Rust and Marowak, because they always got on very well anyway. So I wouldn't want to be like just wipe the slate clean on that one, because it's I think it's difficult to wind back character development. On paper it's very easy, but in terms of like the feeling that's there,
absolutely. I know that would be the difficult thing for me, is that like and I've done that too, where I've taken a character that I played in one game, like, and it wasn't on stream, it was just I took it from one home game to someone else's game, and I'm like, nope, this is still the same character, this is canon. Like, I'm keeping all that in there.
Yeah, I think that's really nice.
I love just the ongoing character development of player characters. I genuinely find that fascinating as it goes across game and session and everything like that. And I think that's one reason, like I've said on a few of Idle Insights where I've talked to folks doing Isle Champions Presents, they always talk about those, like the ultimate crossover. And like, that's every time for me with Isle Champions Presents. I love getting to see people who have a history with a character play with someone else who has as much history with their character or whatnot. It's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it is really lovely. But also I think, again, it really makes me reflect on what a good job like Mark and Gabe have done with bringing new characters in, but making them feel so vivid from the get-go. I think it's really impressive.
Them at the very beginning, I was like, They haven't played these before? Like, I know they haven't. I've been behind the scenes on this the whole time. What do you mean they haven't been playing this?
Yeah, the way they were talking, like I know they cooked up stuff between them before, but the way they were talking, I was like, damn, you need to watch whatever this show was. Like, no, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. They're just doing a good job.
I would kill for a Miria and Solok sitcom. That would be incredible. Like just the backstory, but it's just a like a one side multi-camera sitcom.
Miria, you forgot to put the milk back again. Like, no.
It's fine. I'll bring it back from being expired.
Necromantic milk. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Necromantic milk might be the worst 2 words ever put together.
Yeah, I'll back you on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like we said, the finale is next week. Do you have like any hopes for anything that might happen in it, or are you just going in?
I'd love to survive.
That'd be good.
I'd love to live. That'd be great. Because I'm pretty sure we're not getting a long rest. And you know what? Like, Rust is actually doing okay. Rust is still got 90-something hit points.
That's not bad. That's good.
But I don't know. It just feels like the stakes are so high that in terms of Rust really having a grip on the situation beyond what's happening moment to moment is non-applicable. Like, he just sort of looks up, he's like, oh, okay, there's a big dragon, okay, like so obviously I hope that we can leave Kryn, number one, alive, but and two, like, in a slightly more agreeable state than we put it in when we arrive.
That's fair.
Like, I feel like we've done okay with the Lord Soth thing, but obviously it turns out Lord Soth was kind of like a very important can on the sort of can of beans display that is Kryn. I feel like we've set events into motion that cannot be undone. And I would like to be able to walk away with Russ' head held high that he at least didn't make it appreciably worse.
I think that's just a great goal for the end of a campaign in general.
Yeah, how many times have I achieved that across campaigns? Oh, not many. Not many at all. Yep. As a player, I've failed to stop the apocalypse twice.
Oh boy.
Yep.
That is okay. There you go.
Yeah.
One of the last things I want to talk about was just as Fear of the Black Rose started, we got some new skins in the game, and Rust got a new Dragonlance skin.
I know.
Tell me about that, how that went.
Well, again, it was kind of one of those ones where they were like, do you have any particular ideas for how this could be Dragonlance wise? And I was kind of, everything I came up with was bad.
Oh, why was it bad?
Well, there's a reason I'm not an artistic designer,
okay, I can't knock you for saying that. When I put in art requests at CNE, I will literally put out my whole idea, and then at the end, but I don't really know anything about this, so whatever you want to do is great.
So I will say, right. So there's one other special skin for Rust in which he is a pirate ship. Like,
yes,
he is a whole pirate ship. Right? Yeah, it's wonderful. But the initial idea I put across was, like the first appearance he had in the Oxventurers, it was all about wheat and all about crop farming. What if we made him into a straw bear? And they went, what is a straw bear? And I went, that's fair, because it was a very, very niche UK folk thing where it's a festival where like
I'm looking this up right now.
Google one now. They're mad. Like it's basically, if you just imagine like just sheaths of straw covering arms and limbs and their head, they look like a massive like walking like straw golem, basically.
Yeah, that is a perfect example.
Right. And I was like, make the cat rogue into that. And they reasonably went, no. And I went, that's fair. So I'll be honest with you, when Dragonlance rolled around, I was like, I would love to see what you come up with. I didn't send them anything in the end. Well, I didn't send them any of the sort of ideas that were floating around in my head. I was just like, I trust you. It's been a delight working with you on this. And and you know, I'll be honest with you, you almost certainly know more about Dragonlance than me. Like, go with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know this peppy young boy as much as well as anyone else. So, and as per usual, they didn't miss. You know, like I loved the kind of the cowl in particular that they kind of came up with. It really reminded me of a miniature I painted a while
Oh.
before that had sort of like this sort of like scaly, like not poncho, but like cape thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was so cool. And then seeing it on Rust, I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it. There it is.
I'm
And the
not
color
gonna lie
choices.
though.
And,
After
yeah.
saying this, I am going to try in as many meetings as possible to get a straw bear rust skin. Because
Okay.
when I saw this at first, I'm like, oh, it's just like it's like a scarecrow made out of straw. And then I saw one going like, ha ha. I'm like, oh no.
Oh no, there's a man in there.
Like, I need this shape with Rust's face poking out and a rapier. I need that. I need it.
Hey, listen, if you can get that signed off, then I will owe you many a drink because it was a tough sell, let me tell you.
Yeah, I seem to be slightly okay going, okay, you know it would be ridiculous. And getting things to work, so we'll see what happens.
Mhm.
Well, that brings us to the end of my questions. Johnny, thank you so much for joining me today. This is an
Oh, no,
absolute
thank
joy.
you. It's been a delight.
If people wanted to find you and what you do on the interwebs, where could they do so?
I think the easiest way would be to go to youtube.com/Johnny Chiodini, which is where I stream twice a week and I have sort of like video game let's play series, but also youtube.com/Oxventure. It's that easy. And to be
Yeah.
honest with you, there aren't that many Chiodinis about. So if you just type Johnny Chiodini into Google, it'll point you to the right one.
Okay, I'm gonna be very transparent with you. I may have listened to you pronounce your voice like 20 times this morning, or
Oh, I wouldn't.
pronounce your
Yeah.
name 20 times this morning, because I'm like, I don't want to mess it up.
You know, do you want to? I'll let you in on a secret.
Hmm.
Like, I'm mispronouncing it really. I'm not even kidding. I was getting checked into a hotel once, and the lovely Italian lady behind the desk couldn't find my surname until I started spelling it, and she
Yeah.
went, "Oh, Chiodini." And I was like, "Yeah, that's my name." And she was like, "No, you're not saying it right." She came out from behind the counter, stood next to me, and was like, "Come on with me. You need to learn to say this properly." And I was sat there, I was thinking, like, I know how to say it properly, but like, my family's been in London for generations,
Yeah.
and if I'm talking to you like this, and then suddenly I go like Chiodini, like everyone's gonna think, right? You can't. So it's just easier if I just say Chiodini.
That's
Like,
fair.
it's
That's
just
fair. It's a
so.
cool name. I like.
Thanks.
I do love that on your Twitter profile. You phonetically sounded it out. I'm like, I like you. You helped me.
Yeah, like I'm a dinosaur. It's makes me feel special, like my museum exhibit.
I mean, when it comes to names, I have a random A in my name, and people try to overdo it with like Treavor, tree. My favorite.
Treavor.
B Dave gave me the nickname Treavor, which has stuck in the community for like a couple years now.
He loves phonetic components, doesn't he? He just loves to do it.
It does. But that's the first one that I heard that I'm like, okay, that one was funny. We can keep that one.
Yeah.
But Oxventure is going to be at a PAX coming up soon, aren't they?
Yes, PAX East. So when this goes out, it'll be this weekend.
Oh my god,
yeah.
is it really already PAX?
Yeah. So it is 3 p.m. in the Dragonfly Theatre, which is upstairs, because it's a flying creature. It's very clever how they do that. It should be very, very good fun. So if people are at PAX, come along.
Yeah, be sure to check out Oxventure. You can see him live. Yeah. But once again, Johnny, thank you so much for joining me today. I cannot wait to see how Isle Champions Prince Fury of the Black Rose wraps up, and that's happening this coming Monday. Well, as long as you're watching it this Thursday, at 10 a.m. Pacific, and then they'll rebroadcast at 4 p.m. Pacific after that. Yeah, thank you again, Johnny. That's gonna do it for this week's episode of Isle Insight. So until next week, take care of yourself.
Bye.